Good morning. Today, we move on to the next topic in phonetics, that is the articulation of speech sounds. How do we speak? Have you ever thought about it? We know that we all start to speak much before we start to write. Any normal human being, by normal I mean anyone who has the organs that are required to produce the sounds of speech, begins speaking by the time he is 1.5 or 2 years old. In fact, we start articulating or producing our first words by the time we are 1 year old. So, we speak much before we start writing. It is only human beings who are gifted with this ability to speak. Now, how do we speak? We require air in order to speak. Which is this air that we use in order to produce the sounds of human speech? All of us breathe. How do we breathe? When we breathe, we inhale air into our lungs. When we inhale, we take in air from the atmosphere. This air passes through the windpipe or the trachea, reaches the bronchus, which is a tube which deviates into the two bronchi. The air passes through the bronchus, goes into the bronchi, and finally reaches the lungs. This is what happens during the process called inspiration. We exhale or we breathe out air after taking the required oxygen from the air. We breathe out the carbon dioxide. Now, what happens when we exhale? The air is pushed out from the lungs. It passes through the two bronchi, reaches the tube called the bronchus, from where it moves on through the windpipe and is finally thrown out into the atmosphere through the nose. This is what happens when we breathe. Now, in order to produce speech sounds, we require a moving current of air. And the air that is used, or the airstream that is used in order to produce the sounds of most languages spoken in the world, is the air that is breathed out from the lungs, the air that is exhaled from the lungs. In fact, all the sounds of English and most Indian languages except Sindhi are produced using this air that we breathe out from the lungs. So a speech mechanism is involved in the production of speech sounds. This speech mechanism used to produce the sounds of English and most Indian languages and several other languages in the world make use of lung air, or the air which we refer to as the airstream that we refer to as the pulmonic airstream. The airstream that is breathed into the lungs is called the ingressive airstream, and the airstream that is pushed out from the lungs is called the egressive pulmonic airstream. So in order to produce the sounds of English, we make use of a pulmonic egressive airstream mechanism. Now, as we said earlier, it is human beings who are gifted with the ability to speak. Now, in this speech mechanism, we can include three systems: the respiratory system, the phonatory system, and the articulatory system. It is the respiratory system which I just described to you. The respiratory system includes the trunk of the body, or it consists of organs which are present in the trunk of our body, that is from the neck to the abdomen. The articulatory system lies in the head, and the phonatory system lies in the throat. The respiratory system includes the lungs, the muscles of the chest, the windpipe, and the bronchus, which consists of the bronchi. As I just told you, when we breathe in, the air passes through our windpipe or the trachea. It reaches the bronchus, passes through the two bronchi, and finally reaches the lungs. The same process is reversed when we exhale air, or when we breathe out air from the lungs. So the lungs are a pair of soft, spongy bodies situated in the chest on either side. When we breathe in and breathe out, the airstream is referred to as the pulmonic airstream. Next, let's take a look at the phonatory system. The phonatory system consists of the larynx, which consists of the vocal cords. The larynx contains the vocal cords. The larynx is like a box. Often we refer to it as the Adam's apple. And you might have noticed that the Adam's apple is more prominent in the case of men. That's why it's called Adam's apple and not Eve's. Okay. So inside the larynx, we have what are called the vocal cords. The vocal cords are a pair of lip-like structures situated within the larynx. The vocal cords and the larynx are also involved in speech production. While talking about the respiratory system, I told you how the lungs, the windpipe or the trachea, the bronchus, the bronchi, and so on are involved in order to produce speech sounds. The vocal cords placed inside the larynx are a pair of narrow lip-like structures. They are joined in the front but free or loose at the back. Because of this, the vocal cords can take up three different positions. They can be held wide apart. Imagine these are the vocal cords. So they are joined in the front but free or loose at the back. So the vocal cords can be pressed together tightly, they can be held loosely together, or they can be drawn apart. Now the space within the vocal cords is referred to as the glottis. Now there are three positions that the vocal cords can take. When the vocal cords are wide apart, the glottis, the space within the vocal cords, is wide open. When we breathe, this is the position of the glottis and the vocal cords. So when the glottis is open, the air that we breathe in to the lungs and the air that we breathe out from the lungs is able to pass out freely through the wide open glottis. This is the position for breath. Now it is possible to produce speech sounds with the vocal cords in this wide open position. Such speech sounds are referred to as voiceless sounds or breathed sounds. The second position of the vocal cords is the vocal cords held together loosely. Not tightly pressed together, but loosely held. Now, when the vocal cords are held together loosely, they are pushed apart by the pressure of the air coming from the lungs. When this happens, the vocal cords vibrate. That is, they open and shut many times in a second. This is what we call the vibration of the vocal cords. It is possible to produce speech sounds with the vocal cords in this position also. That is, when the vocal cords vibrate. Now, when the vocal cords vibrate, a humming note, a humming sound is produced. It is this humming note that is technically referred to as voice. When we produce certain sounds, the vocal cords are in this loosely held position so that they vibrate. And these speech sounds will be accompanied by this humming sound called voice. That is why such speech sounds which are accompanied by voice are referred to as voiced sounds. So we have two types of sounds based on the position of the vocal cords. Voiced sounds when the vocal cords are held together loosely so that they vibrate, and voiceless sounds or breathed sounds when the vocal cords are held wide apart and the glottis is wide open. Of the 44 sounds of RP, all the vowel sounds are voiced. Some of the consonants are voiceless and some of them are voiced. The third position of the vocal cords is when the glottis is closed. This happens when the vocal cords are pressed together tightly. This is what happens when we eat. We are advised not to speak while eating, because if we speak while eating, the vocal cords might separate, resulting in an opening of the vocal cords, and the food particles might enter the windpipe, resulting in choking, which might sometimes even prove fatal. So these are the three positions of the vocal cords: the tightly pressed vocal cords, so that they act as a valve, preventing the entry of food and water into the windpipe or into the lungs. The second position, the vocal cords wide apart, glottis open, resulting in voiceless or breathed sounds. And the third one, the vocal cords held loosely so that they vibrate, producing a humming note called voice and resulting in the production of voiced sounds. Now we can distinguish between voiceless and voiced sounds. Let's do a simple experiment. You can place the fingers of your palm over your Adam's apple. Try saying the sound represented by the letter S, that is the sound S. If you place your fingers on your throat or on your Adam's apple, your larynx, and say the sound represented by the letter S, S, you will not feel anything on your fingertips. But if you repeat the same thing, saying the sound represented by the letter B, that is the sound B, or a sound represented by the letter Z, Z. When you do this, you will feel a vibration along your fingers. S, no vibration. Z, there is vibration. So this shows that S is a voiceless sound, but Z is a voiced sound. We can prove the same thing by doing another experiment. If you place your palms over your ears and say these two sounds, S and Z, alternately, you can feel the difference. You will experience a buzzing sound while saying the sound Z, which is not present when you say the sound S. So this goes to show that the sound represented by the English letter S is voiceless, while the sound Z and B are voiced. So this is about the phonatory system. So we move on to the third part of the speech mechanism, that is the articulatory system. The articulatory system comprises organs like the lips, the teeth, the tongue, and the palate. The tongue can be divided into different parts, like the tip of the tongue, the blade of the tongue, the front of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, the back of the tongue. The roof of the mouth or the palate can also be divided into 4 parts. The teeth ridge or the alveolum. The teeth ridge or the alveolum or the alveolar ridge is the narrow, hard surface, the portion which lies immediately behind the upper front teeth. You can feel it with your tongue. The narrow ridge-like portion immediately behind the upper front teeth. Okay, if you allow your tongue to move back, if you go back, the roof of the mouth suddenly becomes concave. This concave arch-like structure of the roof of the mouth is referred to as the hard palate. As you move your tongue further back inside the oral cavity, the roof of the mouth suddenly becomes soft. Okay, this soft portion is called the back, it is called the soft palate. There is still one more portion beyond the soft palate or velum, which we cannot feel with our tongue. But if you go home and look into a mirror, open your mouth wide, look into a mirror, you can see a soft fleshy portion hanging at the back of your mouth. And that is the last part of the roof of the mouth. It is called the uvula. So we have 4 parts of the roof of the mouth or the palate. They are the alveolum or the teeth ridge, the hard palate, the soft palate, and the uvula. The palate is the portion which lies opposite the tongue inside the oral cavity. The tongue can also be divided into different parts like this for convenience. We have the extreme end of the tongue, which is called the tip. After that, we have the blade of the tongue, the front of the tongue, the back of the tongue, and finally the root of the tongue. The lips are also involved in speech production. So these are the various organs included in the articulatory system. How do the lips play a part in speech production? If you consider a sound like P, you can see that in order to produce this sound, we require the lips. The 2 articulators or the 2 organs involved while producing the sound P or B are the 2 lips, the upper lip and the lower lip. When we say the sound represented by the English letter when we say a sound like F, which are the 2 organs involved? The lower lip and the upper front teeth. This shows how the lower lip and the upper front teeth, the teeth are also involved in speech production. The soft palate or the velum plays a very significant role in speech production. The peculiarity of the soft palate is that it can be raised or lowered. When we raise the soft palate, the passage into the nose is blocked. That means the air that is pushed out from the lungs cannot pass out through the nostrils. If there is no block anywhere in the oral cavity, the air coming out from the lungs is able to pass out only through the mouth. But when we lower the soft palate, and if there is no block anywhere in the oral cavity, the nasal passage is open and the air coming from the lungs can also pass out through the nose. This is what happens when we produce nasalized sounds. That means the air coming from the lungs can pass out through both the nose as well as through the mouth. When the soft palate is in the raised position and the lung air is able to escape only through the mouth, we get oral sounds. When the nasal passage is blocked, when the oral passage is blocked and the air can pass out only through the nose, we get what are called nasal sounds. To prove this, let me give you a small demonstration. When we say the sound represented by the letter M in English, that is the sound the final sound in a word like some, you can see, if you try saying that sound, you can see that in order to produce this sound, there is a closure formed at the lips. So there is an oral closure. That means the air coming from the lungs cannot pass out through the mouth. But if the soft palate is lowered, this air can be released or it can escape through the nose. This is exactly what happens when we say the sound The nasal passage is open, the oral passage is closed. So the air passes out through the nose. So the soft palate plays a very significant role in helping us to produce three types of sounds: orals, nasals, and nasalized sounds. So this is how various organs are involved in the production of speech. Now most of these organs that we use when we produce speech sounds, they have other primary functions. For example, if you consider the lungs, what is the primary function of the lungs? It is to respire or breathe. If you take the tongue, the main function of the tongue is to taste, and it is also involved in mastication or chewing. If you take the lips, they also have other primary function. If you consider the nose is primarily involved in breathing. So speech production is only an additional function assigned to all these organs. Beside their primary function, all these organs are assigned the additional function of speech production. So for convenience sake, we refer to these organs as organs of speech. All the organs falling in these three systems, the respiratory system, the phonatory system, and the articulatory system, or in other words, coming in the speech mechanism, all these organs are labeled organs of speech, though they have other primary functions. So these are the three systems involved in the speech mechanism. This is how the various speech sounds are articulated. So with that, let's wind up for the day. Thank you.